lamp placed near her workspace. She shields it from a passing gust, then trims the char. Even light requires tending. Without it, none of this delicate sorting could continue. Joke number 2 emerges when someone mutters that the children's eyes are sharper than his, and perhaps they should be the ones negotiating gold prices with traders. A sleepy chuckle answers him from the shadows. You glance at the huts. Some doors are now dark, lamps extinguished. Others still glow faintly, marking where late tasks continue. The camp is not uniform. It breathes in pockets. A scholarly debate lingers in your thoughts. Historians still argue whether some mining camps operated under direct royal administration with strict oversight or whether smaller groups maintained semi-independent arrangements, delivering agreed portions of gold in exchange for supplies. In reality, the situation may have shifted over centuries, influenced by political strength and regional stability. A girl pauses her washing and looks up at the sky. For a moment, she seems distracted by the stars. Then she returns to the basin. Even in childhood, work and wonder coexist. Joke number 3 surfaces when a woman jokingly tells a man that if he ever complains about sore arms again, she will hand him the grinding stone and take his hammer instead. He responds that he prefers the hammer because at least it argues back less. Soft laughter drifts into the night. The lamps burn lower still. The grinding slows. One by one, tasks conclude. Baskets are set aside. Basins are emptied. Gold flecks are added carefully to small containers. You begin to understand that this camp is sustained not only by the dramatic act of breaking stone but by the quieter, continuous labor that follows. Without these hands, patient, precise, the mountain's treasure would remain trapped in useless rock. The woman finally sets down her grinding stone and stretches her fingers. The child beside her is asleep now, curled on the mat. The lamp flickers, steady and small. And in this softer phase of night, you see the full picture. Gold extraction is not a solitary hero's tale. It is a woven fabric of many hands, working patiently under the patient stars. The camp has grown quieter still, but one area remains gently alert. A small shelter near the center where a single lamp burns a little brighter than the others. You wander toward it, curiosity guiding your steps over cooling sand. Inside, a low wooden table holds several small leather pouches, a balance scale made from a simple beam and 2 shallow pans, and a set of stone weights worn smooth from use. Seated beside the table is a man whose posture is straighter than the others, his linen robe slightly finer, his expression carefully neutral. He is not swinging a hammer tomorrow. He is counting. Gold, after all, is not only extracted. It is measured. Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. In many ancient Nile Valley societies, including Nubia during certain periods, gold production was overseen by officials who tracked output and ensured portions reached royal authorities. Administrative control over precious resources was a hallmark of organized states, whether Kushite or Egyptian. The man lifts one pouch and gently pours a portion of gold dust into a pan of the balance. On the other side, he places a small stone weight. The beam dips, then steadies. He adjusts the amount with careful taps, his movements economical. No dramatic gestures, just quiet arithmetic under lamplight. You watch the scale hover in delicate equilibrium. It feels almost sacred, the moment when invisible value becomes quantified. Historians still argue about how centralized control over Nubian gold mines truly was at different points in history. Some evidence suggests direct royal expeditions with appointed overseers. Other findings imply more locally managed operations that paid tribute. The truth likely shifted over time, depending on political strength and geography. The overseer, if that is indeed his role, makes a small mark on a clay tablet with a reed stylus. The script is simple, perhaps tally marks rather than elaborate inscriptions. Literacy in ancient Nubia evolved over time, influenced by Egyptian hieroglyphs and later the Meroitic script. Whether every mining camp had a literate scribe is uncertain, but some form of record-keeping would have been essential where valuable materials were involved. A miner stands nearby, arms crossed, watching the weighing process with polite patience. There is no visible hostility, but there is awareness. The balance does not only measure gold, it measures trust. A quirky tidbit floats into the air when one worker mutters that the scale is pickier than a priest choosing offerings. The overseer glances up with a faint smirk but says nothing. That's joke number 1 for this section. Light but edged. You imagine how gold quotas might feel to those whose arms ache from hammering. If a shipment falls short, does the overseer demand longer hours? Or does he simply record the deficit and pass the tension up the chain of command? Historians still argue about the degree of coercion present in such camps. Whether laborers were free workers, conscripted locals, enslaved captives from conflict, or some combination depending on era and region. Archaeological evidence alone rarely tells you who felt free and who did not. The scale tips slightly as another pinch of dust is added. The overseer nods once, satisfied. He empties the measured gold into a larger pouch and seals it carefully with a knotted cord. Outside the shelter, a donkey shifts in its sleep. You wonder if it senses that tomorrow it may carry this carefully weighed wealth toward the river. A second miner approaches with his pouch. He waits as the process repeats: pour, weigh, adjust, record. The lamp's flame illuminates drifting gold particles like tiny stars suspended between pan and table. Joke number 2 arrives quietly when one worker whispers that he wishes the scale could measure tiredness instead of gold. The overseer replies dryly that if it did, the pan would snap in half. A few restrained chuckles ripple through the small group. You glance at the weights themselves. They are modest, likely shaped from stone or perhaps cast metal, standardized to some known measure. The existence of such weights speaks to broader economic systems. Trade and taxation depend on agreed units. Without them, gold is just glittering sand. The overseer wipes the edge of the pan with a cloth, ensuring no flecks cling to it. Even the smallest grain matters. Historians still argue how gold was valued relative to other goods in Nubia during different periods, whether it functioned more as state-controlled wealth or circulated widely in exchange. Direct evidence is scarce, and much of what we know comes from Egyptian records that may emphasize certain aspects over others. The lamp flickers as a breeze brushes through the doorway. The overseer cups his hand around the flame briefly, shielding it. Even authority relies on fragile light. You notice something else. The miners are not speaking loudly here. Their voices soften in this space. There is an unspoken recognition that this is where their day's effort transforms into something official. Joke number 3 slips in when a miner, watching the careful adjustments, mutters that the scale probably dreams of feathers to make its job easier. The overseer replies without looking up that if gold weighed like feathers, no one would bother mining it. Fair point. The final pouch is sealed. The clay tablet is set aside. The balance beam is hung carefully on a peg, its pans nested together to prevent accidental damage. The overseer rises, stretching his back. Even record-keeping takes its toll. He carries the larger pouch toward a locked chest, a simple wooden box reinforced with leather straps. The chest is placed near his sleeping area. Proximity equals security. You step back from the shelter and into the cooler night air. The lamp inside continues to glow, marking the administrative heart of the camp. In this quiet weighing ritual, you see another layer of the gold's journey. From rock to dust, from dust to pouch, from pouch to record, from record to river. Tomorrow, the mountain will demand more hammer blows. But tonight, the scales rest balanced, and the gold, now counted and acknowledged, waits patiently for its next movement under the watchful eyes of oil and flame. By now, most of the camp lies stretched out on woven mats, wrapped in linen cloaks, faces softened by exhaustion. Only a handful of lamps remain lit, marking gentle islands of awareness in the dark. You step away from the huts and wander toward a low rise overlooking the Nile, needing a little space from the quiet hum of sleeping bodies. The night sky above Nubia is vast and unpolluted, a deep indigo dome pierced by thousands of stars. Without modern lights, the Milky Way spills across the heavens in a pale river that mirrors the Nile below. You tilt your head back and feel very small, which is oddly comforting. A miner joins you silently, lowering himself onto a flat stone. He says nothing for a while. You both simply look up. Here is your mainstream historical anchor for this section. Ancient Nile Valley cultures, including Nubians and Egyptians, paid close attention to the night sky. Certain stars and constellations were used for calendrical purposes, agricultural timing, and religious symbolism. The heliacal rising of Sirius, for example, was famously linked to the annual Nile flood in Egypt, and similar astronomical awareness likely extended southward into Nubian regions. The miner points to a bright star near the horizon. He calls it by a local name you don't recognize. Whether it corresponds exactly to Sirius or another prominent star is uncertain, but the gesture reveals familiarity. The sky is not abstract here. It is practical. It tells seasons. It guides travel. Historians still argue about the precise astronomical knowledge systems of Kushite Nubia compared to Egypt, because written records are fewer and archaeological alignments are open to interpretation. Some scholars suggest sophisticated sky-watching traditions, while others caution against overestimating what can be proven. A breeze moves gently off the river, carrying the faint scent of water and reeds. It cools the day's stored heat from your skin. In the distance, you hear a splash, perhaps a fish, perhaps something larger. The Nile supports life in countless forms. The miner beside you mentions that when he travels upriver, he navigates partly by the stars when landmarks fade into darkness. The desert can be disorienting at night, but the sky is steady. You imagine caravans guided by constellations, their paths drawn across sand by celestial reference points. A quirky tidbit slips into conversation. He says that some older workers believe the souls of miners become stars after death, watching over the hills they once chipped away. It's a poetic notion, and not entirely unique. Many ancient cultures associated the dead with celestial realms. Whether this specific belief was widespread in Nubian mining communities is hard to verify, but the idea feels natural in this setting. You glance back toward the camp. The remaining lamps resemble fallen stars scattered across the earth. There's a comforting symmetry. Joke number 1 arrives softly when the miner remarks that if every complaint he has ever made turned into a star, the sky would be unbearably crowded. You consider this and decide the universe is safe for now. You return your gaze upward. The constellations appear sharper the longer you stare. Without city lights, depth reveals itself. You can almost sense the arc of time stretching beyond this moment, before the camp existed, before gold was valued, before even the Nile carved its path. Yet for the miners, the sky is not purely philosophical. It marks cycles, flood seasons, planting times, travel windows. Even mining might shift with temperature and seasonal water availability. Historians still argue how closely mining schedules were tied to agricultural cycles. Some propose that laborers split time between farming along the Nile and seasonal mining expeditions inland. Others suggest more permanent specialist communities near major gold fields. The debate hinges on settlement patterns and tool distributions, and it remains open. The miner beside you stretches out on the flat stone, hands behind his head. He says the sky makes the tunnels feel smaller, which is probably true in more ways than one. Joke number 2 emerges when he claims that if the stars truly guide miners to gold, they have a strange sense of humor. You nod solemnly. Celestial navigation seems excellent for travel, less so for identifying quartz veins. A faint sound rises from the riverbank, a soft rustle in reeds. You recall earlier references to crocodiles along certain stretches of the Nile. Ancient texts and archaeological remains confirm their presence in various periods. Crocodiles were both feared and revered, associated with the god Sobek in Egyptian religion. Nubian communities along the Nile would certainly have known these creatures well. The miner gestures toward the water and mutters that crocodiles prefer fish to miners. Most of the time. That's joke number 3, delivered with dry understatement. You decide not to test the statistics. The lamps in the camp burn lower still. A few wink out one by one, pinched carefully between fingers. The darkness grows richer, but not oppressive. The stars compensate. You think about the afterlife beliefs that might have circulated here. In Egypt, elaborate funerary traditions aimed to preserve the body and guide the soul through the afterlife. Nubian practices varied across time, sometimes adopting and adapting Egyptian elements, sometimes emphasizing distinct traditions. The presence of pyramids in Nubia, particularly during the Napatan and Meroitic periods, demonstrates complex royal funerary systems. Historians still argue about how these elite religious practices filtered down to everyday workers. Did miners imagine elaborate journeys through the underworld? Or were their beliefs more localized, shaped by hills, river, and community memory? You sit quietly with these thoughts. The desert night feels less empty now and more like a vast ceiling above a small but determined world. The miner rises slowly and nods toward the camp. It's time to sleep. Even stars must give way to dawn eventually. You take one last look upward. The constellations burn steady, indifferent to gold and quotas and sore shoulders. Yet they have witnessed all of it. As you walk back toward the remaining glow of oil lamps, you feel the night settle around you like a blanket, cool, expansive, quietly watchful. Tomorrow the hills will call again. But for now, the sky holds its silent vigil over Nubian miners and their flickering lamps. You return to the camp slowly, letting your eyes adjust from starlight back to the warmer glow of the remaining lamps. Most of the settlement now lies in shadow, bodies curled beneath linen, breaths deep and even. Yet not all rest is peaceful. Mining leaves its signatures on muscle and bone. Near one hut, a man sits upright while an older woman examines his forearm in the lamplight. His skin is dusted pale from stone powder, and a thin scrape runs along his wrist where rock met flesh earlier that day. It isn't dramatic, no heroic battlefield injury, just the quiet wear and tear of repetitive labor. Here is your mainstream historical anchor for this section. Skeletal remains from ancient mining regions in Egypt and Nubia show evidence of joint stress, spinal compression, and repetitive strain injuries consistent with heavy manual labor. Mining was physically demanding, and the body recorded that fact long after the lamps went out. The woman dips a cloth into a small bowl of liquid and gently presses it to the scrape. The scent rising from it is sharp and green, perhaps crushed herbs mixed with water or oil infused with plant extracts. Ancient Nile Valley medical knowledge, especially in Egypt, is well documented in papyri describing treatments with honey, herbs, and mineral compounds. While less written material survives from Nubian contexts, it's reasonable to imagine shared or adapted healing practices circulating along trade and cultural routes. Historians still argue how much formal medical knowledge reached remote mining camps versus being improvised from local tradition. Did workers carry remedies learned from temple physicians, or rely mainly on generational folk knowledge? The answer likely blends both. The man winces slightly as the cloth presses against his skin. The woman mutters something reassuring, tying a simple band of linen around his wrist. Linen, beyond clothing, served practical medical purposes. Clean strips to bind wounds, hold poultices, or support strained joints. You notice another miner lying flat on his back, a small rolled cloth placed under his neck. Someone presses gently along his shoulders, thumbs digging into knotted muscle. It looks like an ancient massage session, quiet and focused. The miner exhales slowly, tension draining inch by inch. A quirky tidbit drifts from the older woman as she works. She claims that applying honey to minor cuts helps them heal faster and keeps away tiny, unseen creatures. Interestingly, ancient Egyptian medical texts do recommend honey for wound treatment due to its antibacterial properties. Whether Nubian camps routinely used honey this way isn't fully documented, but the idea is plausible and surprisingly modern in its logic. You sit beside a low stone where a small clay jar holds what looks like crushed resin. The scent is warm and slightly sweet, perhaps incense, perhaps medicinal. Inhaling it feels calming. Joke number 1 for this section arrives softly when the man with the wrist scrape mutters that if the mountain could feel pain, it would have stopped fighting back by now. The older woman replies that the mountain is stubborn because it doesn't have to wake up sore. A few quiet chuckles ripple through the nearby sleepers without fully waking them. You glance at a miner who coughs lightly, a dry, persistent sound. Dust inhalation must have been a constant companion underground. Fine particles from crushed quartz could irritate lungs over time. Historians still argue about the long-term respiratory effects on ancient miners, since direct evidence is difficult to extract from skeletal remains alone. But logically, breathing mineral dust in confined spaces could not have been kind. A younger woman brings a cup of warm liquid, perhaps an herbal infusion. The coughing miner sips slowly, steam curling into the night air. The act feels tender, almost ceremonial. Another man extends his leg, revealing a swollen ankle. He likely twisted it navigating uneven rock. The older woman presses gently along the joint, then wraps it tightly with cloth strips. Support and compression, ancient and effective. Joke number 2 drifts in when someone whispers that if sore backs earned gold, they would be richer than the king. A sleepy voice murmurs agreement from a nearby mat. You notice how the lamps are positioned carefully near these small treatments. Light is necessary for healing too. Without it, even a minor wound could be overlooked. The woman reaches into a small pouch and produces what looks like powdered mineral, perhaps ground malachite or another locally available substance. She sprinkles a bit onto a cut, then covers it. Ancient medicinal practices sometimes incorporated mineral powders believed to draw out impurities. Whether this particular substance has real antiseptic properties or symbolic value is hard to say. Historians still argue how standardized ancient healing methods were across regions, especially in communities outside major urban centers. Written medical texts largely come from Egypt, but oral traditions likely adapted remedies to local plants and conditions in Nubia. A child stirs in sleep and murmurs softly. His mother adjusts his blanket and smooths his hair, her hands still faintly scented with herbs. You become aware of your own body, the imagined ache in your shoulders from swinging a hammer you never actually lifted. It's easy to romanticize ancient labor from a distance. Up close, it is repetitive, gritty, and unforgiving. Joke number 3 slips gently into the air when the man with the bandaged wrist declares,